The Payment of Wages Act, 1936, governs the timely and lawful payment of wages to employees, with sections 3 to 7 forming its core. Section 3 places responsibility for wage payment on employers or supervisors, while Section 4 mandates fixing wage periods not exceeding 1 month. Under Section 5, wages must be paid by the 7th or 10th day of the subsequent month, depending on the size of the establishment. Section 6 requires wages to be paid in cash unless otherwise agreed, and Section 7 allows specific deductions, such as for fines, absences, or damage caused by negligence. Authorities under the Act include inspectors to ensure compliance and adjudicating bodies under Section 15 to address disputes. Penalties under Section 20 impose fines for delayed or non-payment and unauthorized deductions, with enhanced penalties for repeated violations, ensuring strict adherence to the law. The Child and Adolescent Labor Prohibition and Regulation Act, 1986 bans the employment of children under 14 in any occupation and adolescents, 14 to 18, in hazardous work. It ensures safe working conditions, including clean, well-ventilated workplaces, proper lighting, and safety measures for machinery. The Act is enforced by the district magistrate, who can appoint officers to monitor compliance. Key provisions: adolescents can work no more than 6 hours a day, with rest intervals. Night work, 7 p.m. to 8 a.m., is prohibited. At least one weekly holiday is mandatory. Workplaces must meet safety and sanitation standards. Penalties: imprisonment for 3 months to 2 years. Fines ranging from 10,000 rupee to 50,000 rupees. Both imprisonment and fine for serious offences. Repeated offences attract harsher penalties. Non-compliance may result in imprisonment or a fine. The Act aims to protect children and adolescents from exploitation, ensuring their rights and well-being in the workforce. Employees' Compensation Act, 1923. Definitions: Commissioner and Compensation. Employees' Compensation Act, 1923. Commissioner. Under the Act, the Commissioner is an appointed authority who adjudicates claims and disputes related to employee compensation. They have the power to assess compensation, enforce settlements, and oversee compliance with the Act. Compensation. Compensation refers to the monetary relief payable to an employee or their dependents in case of injury, disability, or death arising out of and during employment. It is calculated based on the nature of the injury, the employee's age, and their monthly wages. Definitions under the Employees' Compensation Act, 1923. Dependent. A dependent includes family members such as the employee's spouse, children, widowed mother, and other relatives who were financially dependent on the employee at the time of their death. Employee. An employee is any person employed in specific industries or establishments, including those performing manual, clerical, or technical work, but excludes members of the armed forces. Employer. The employer is the person or entity that hires and compensates the employee, including legal representatives of a deceased employer and managing agents. Managing agent. A managing agent is a person or company authorized to manage the affairs of another company or establishment on behalf of the employer. Partial disablement. Partial disablement refers to a reduction in an employee's earning capacity due to an injury, either temporary or permanent, but where they can still perform some form of work. Total disablement. Total disablement is a condition where the employee is completely incapable of earning a livelihood due to an injury, either temporarily or permanently. Wages include all forms of monetary compensation such as salary, dearness allowance, and other payments for work done, excluding bonuses, overtime, and gratuity. Employees' compensation under Sections 3 to 6 of the Employees' Compensation Act, 1923. Formula, LAMD. Section 3 Liability. Section 4 Amount. Section 5 Method of calculation. Section 6 Distribution. Section 3 Employer's liability for compensation. The employer is liable to pay compensation for personal injury caused to an employee by accident arising out of and in the course of employment. Compensation is payable in cases of death, permanent or partial disablement, or occupational diseases. Exceptions: no compensation is payable if the injury is due to the employee's willful disobedience, intoxication, or intentional self-harm. Section 4 Amount of compensation. For death, 50% of monthly wages multiplied by a factor based on the employee's age, or 1,20,000 rupees, whichever is higher. For permanent total disablement, 60% of monthly wages multiplied by the age factor, or 1,40,000 rupees, whichever is higher. For permanent partial disablement, compensation is based on the percentage of loss of earning capacity, as per the schedule. For temporary disablement, half-monthly payments are made at 25% of monthly wages. Section 5 Method of calculating wages. Wages are calculated as the average monthly earnings of the employee over the 12 months preceding the accident. Section 6 Distribution of compensation. Compensation for death is distributed among the dependents of the deceased employee. If no dependents exist, the compensation is deposited with the Commissioner for other purposes specified under the Act. These provisions ensure financial relief to employees or their dependents in case of workplace injuries or diseases. Next, notional extension of employer's premises, Employees' Compensation Act, 1923. The notional extension of employer's premises doctrine extends the liability of an employer for accidents that occur during the course of employment but outside the actual premises. This concept applies when an employee is injured while traveling or performing duties that are inherently connected to their work, even if they are outside the physical boundaries of the workplace. Application: if an employee is injured while on their way to or from work, during commute, or when performing tasks related to the employer's business but outside the premises, it may still be considered as an accident arising out of and in the course of employment. Example: if an employee is traveling between their home and work and is involved in an accident, this may still fall under the employer's liability, provided it is part of their work duties, example, traveling for a business assignment. This extension ensures that employees are protected even when accidents occur in areas not directly controlled by the employer, but related to their work responsibilities. Next, procedural aspects of the Employees' Compensation Act, 1923, Sections 10 to 12. Sections 10, 11, and 12 of the Employees' Compensation Act, 1923 establish important procedures regarding notices, claims, medical examinations, and the responsibilities of employers in cases of outsourcing work. First, Section 10, a claim must be filed within 2 years of an accident. Next, Section 10A, the government can require employers to keep statements about fatal accidents. Next, Section 11, if an employee reports an accident, The employer must provide a free medical examination within 3 days. The employee must undergo medical examinations when requested, unless they are more frequent than necessary. Next, Section 12. If an employer outsources work to a contractor, the employer is still responsible for compensating the workers involved. Section 10 mandates that claims for compensation must be filed within 2 years of the accident, with a notice served to the employer or person in charge of the business. The notice must contain details like the name and address of the injured person, the cause of the injury, and the date of the accident. Section 10 empowers the government to require employers to keep statements about fatal accidents. Section 11 specifies that the employer must provide a free medical examination within 3 days if an employee reports an accident, and the employee is required to attend medical examinations as needed without excessive frequency. Section 12 ensures that even when work is outsourced to a contractor, the employer remains responsible for compensating workers involved in an accident. Additional sections, such as Section 10b, reporting fatal accidents, Section 13, remedies for the employer against third parties, Section 14, insolvency of employers, and Section 15, special provisions for masters and seamen, further outline the framework for handling accidents and compensation claims under the Act. The Employees' State Insurance Act, 1948, an overview. The Employees' State Insurance Act, 1948, ESI Act, is a pioneering social security law in India designed to provide medical care and cash benefits to employees. It was the first major legislation aimed at ensuring social security for workers in independent India. The Act offers various benefits, including sickness benefits, which provide medical care and cash assistance during illness, and maternity benefits, which grant pregnant women extra leave with full salary before and after delivery. Additionally, the Act covers disablement benefits, providing medical care and financial support for temporary or permanent disability, and death benefits, ensuring financial assistance for the family of an employee in case of death due to employment-related injuries. The Act applies primarily to factories with 10 or more employees, though state governments have extended its coverage to other establishments, such as shops, hotels, restaurants, and educational institutions. The central government has the authority to determine the date of implementation and may extend the Act's coverage to other establishments. Its primary objectives are to provide workers with essential benefits during sickness, maternity, or injury, and to promote socio-economic justice in alignment with the directive principles of state policy. Definitions under the Employees' State Insurance Act, 1948. Contribution. A contribution refers to the amount paid by the employer and employee to the employee's state insurance ESI scheme, which funds the benefits provided under the Act. The contribution rate is a percentage of the wages of an insured person, typically shared between the employer and employee. Corporation. The corporation refers to the Employees' State Insurance Corporation, ESIC, which is responsible for the administration and implementation of the provisions of the ESI Act. It oversees the delivery of benefits, insurance schemes, and the management of the ESI fund. Employment injury. Employment injury refers to any injury or accident that occurs during the course of employment, including those that arise out of and in the course of work, which may result in temporary or permanent disablement or death. The Act provides benefits for medical care and compensation for employment. Injuries. Insured person. An insured person is an individual who is covered by the ESI Act. Generally, an employee earning wages up to a specified limit and who is registered under the scheme. These individuals are entitled to the benefits provided under the Act, such as medical care, sickness benefits, and compensation for injuries or death due to employment. These definitions are fundamental to understanding the functioning and coverage of the Employees State Insurance Act, 1948. Adjudication of disputes and claims under the Employees State Insurance Act, 1948. The Employees State Insurance Act, 1948 provides a structured process for resolving disputes related to employee benefits such as sickness, maternity, disability, and death. Disputes typically involve disagreements over contributions, entitlement, or assessment of injury. Claims are reviewed by the Employees State Insurance Corporation, ESIC, and unresolved disputes are referred to employees' insurance courts. Establishment of employees' insurance courts. State governments establish these courts, determining the number of judges, who must have at least 5 years of experience. Courts may cover multiple local areas or be set up for specific regions. Disputes heard by the courts. Employees' insurance courts handle disputes related to the Employees State Insurance Act, including claims for benefits and unpaid dues. Appeals and court decisions. Decisions of the Employees' Insurance Court are usually final, but in certain circumstances, appeals can be made to the High Court for further review. This system ensures fair adjudication of disputes, safeguarding employees' rights to benefits under the Act. Next, the Bonded Labor System Abolition Act, 1976. The Bonded Labor System Abolition Act, 1976 was enacted by the Government of India to eliminate the practice of forced labor and protect vulnerable sections of society from exploitation. The Act aimed to eradicate bonded labor by freeing individuals from economic and physical coercion. Key provisions. The Act abolished the bonded labor system and freed bonded laborers from their obligations. It made it illegal to demand advances or compel individuals to perform bonded labor. It prohibited forcing individuals to work for less than the minimum wage or to work without wages or for nominal wages. The Act made it unlawful to force individuals to work in exchange for loans, social obligations, or inherited duties. Implementation. District magistrates were entrusted with the responsibility of enforcing the provisions of the Act. Vigilance committees were required to be set up at the district and subdivisional levels to monitor and report violations. Judicial magistrates were designated to try offences committed under the Act, ensuring accountability and legal action against perpetrators of bonded labor. This landmark legislation was a significant step toward ensuring social justice and eliminating exploitation in the form of bonded labor in India. Part 2. The Bonded Labor System Abolition Act, 1976, Definitions and Provisions. The Bonded Labor System Abolition Act, 1976 defines bonded labor as forced labor or debt bondage, where individuals are compelled to work for a creditor in exchange for a loan or other economic consideration. Key definitions. Bonded labor, labor that is forced or partly forced in exchange for a loan or other economic consideration. Bonded debt, a debt incurred by a person to a creditor, which typically leads to the individual being bound to work for the creditor to repay the debt. Bonded laborer, a person who is forced to work for a creditor in exchange for a loan or other economic consideration. Bonded labor system. A system where a debtor agrees to work for a creditor in exchange for a loan, typically under conditions of coercion or exploitation. Advance, a payment made by a creditor to a debtor, either in cash, kind, or both, that often leads to the debtor becoming bonded. Agreement, any agreement between a debtor and creditor, whether written, oral, or partly. Both, which formalize the bond of labor. Provisions of the Act. The Act abolished the bonded labor system in India, effective from 25 October 1975. It freed bonded laborers from their obligations to render forced labor. The Act extinguished the liability of bonded laborers to repay bonded debts, relieving them of the financial burden imposed by creditors. It also protected freed bonded laborers from eviction from their homes, ensuring their right to remain in the places they lived before being bound by labor agreements. This legislation was a vital step in eradicating forced labor and debt bondage, promoting social justice and protection for vulnerable individuals in India. Next, legal provisions, Sections 4 to 23 of the Bonded Labor System Abolition Act 1976. Section 4, Abolition of Bonded Labor. Bonded laborers are freed from obligations and cannot be compelled to work for creditors. Section 5, Invalidity of Agreements. Any agreements between bonded laborers and creditors are void after the abolition of bonded labor. Section 6, Rehabilitation of Bonded Laborers. The state government is responsible for rehabilitating freed bonded laborers. Section 7, Enforcement by District Magistrate. The District Magistrate is empowered to take action and enforce the provisions of the Act. Section 8, Offence of Bonded Labor. It is illegal to force someone into bonded labor, with penalties for violations. Section 9, Vigilance Committees. Vigilance committees are established at the district and sub-district levels to monitor bonded labor practices. Section 10, Bonded Labor Rehabilitation Fund. A fund is created to support the rehabilitation of freed bonded laborers. Section 11, Offences and Penalties. Offences under the Act are cognizable and non-bailable, with punishments for violators. Section 12. Appointment of officers. The state government shall appoint officers to ensure the implementation of the Act. Section 13. Welfare of bonded laborers. Provisions are made to ensure the safety and well-being of bonded laborers. Section 14. Punishment for forced labor. Violation of the Act by forcing labor is punishable with imprisonment and fines. Section 15. Protection for women and minors. Special provisions are made to protect women and minors from bonded labor. Section 16. Compensation to victims. Courts can order offenders to compensate the victims of bonded labor. Section 17. Judicial Enforcement. Offences under the Act are enforced by the judiciary through legal proceedings. Section 18. No inherited bonded labor. Bonded labor cannot be inherited or passed down from one generation to another. Section 19. Jurisdiction of courts. Offences under the Act are tried in magistrate courts with appropriate legal procedures. Section 20. Identification of bonded laborers. The State government must identify bonded laborers and provide rehabilitation. Section 21. Responsibility for identification and rehabilitation. Districts and subdistricts are tasked with identifying and rehabilitating bonded laborers. Section 22. Penalties for violations. Offenders are subject to fines and imprisonment depending on the offence's severity. Section 23. Punishment for violation. Violators of the Act face imprisonment for up to 3 years and fines ranging from 2,000 rupee to 5,000 rupees. Next, legal provisions, Sections 4 to 23 of the Bonded Labour System Abolition Act 1976. Section 4. Abolition of bonded labour. Bonded labourers are freed from obligations and cannot be compelled to work for creditors. Section 5. Invalidity of agreements. Any agreements between bonded labourers and creditors are void after the abolition of bonded labour. Section 6. Rehabilitation of bonded labourers. The state government is responsible for rehabilitating freed bonded labourers. Section 7. Enforcement by district magistrate. The district magistrate is empowered to take action and enforce the provisions of the Act. Section 8. Offence of bonded labour. It is illegal to force someone into bonded labour, with penalties for violations. Section 9. Vigilance committees. Vigilance committees are established at the district and subdistrict levels to monitor bonded labour practices. Section 10. Bonded Labour Rehabilitation Fund. A fund is created to support the rehabilitation of freed bonded labourers. Section 11. Offences and penalties. Offences under the Act are cognizable and non-bailable, with punishments for violators. Section 12. Appointment of officers. The state government shall appoint officers to ensure the implementation of the Act. Section 13. Welfare of bonded labourers. Provisions are made to ensure the safety and well-being of bonded labourers. Section 14. Punishment for forced labour. Violation of the Act by forcing labour is punishable with imprisonment and fines. Section 15. Protection for women and minors. Special provisions are made to protect women and minors from bonded labour. Section 16. Compensation to victims. Courts can order offenders to compensate the victims of bonded labour. Section 17. Judicial enforcement. Offences under the Act are enforced by the judiciary through legal proceedings. Section 18. No inherited bonded labour. Bonded labour cannot be inherited or passed down from one generation to another. Section 19. Jurisdiction of courts. Offences under the Act are tried in magistrate courts with appropriate legal procedures. Section 20. Identification of bonded labourers. The state government must identify bonded labourers and provide rehabilitation. Section 21. Responsibility for identification and rehabilitation. Districts and subdistricts are tasked with identifying and rehabilitating bonded labourers. Section 22. Penalties for violations. Offenders are subject to fines and imprisonment depending on the offence's severity. Section 23. Punishment for violation. Violators of the Act face imprisonment for up to 3 years and fines ranging from 2,000 rupee to 5,000 rupees. These sections together ensure the abolition of bonded labour and provide the legal foundation for the rehabilitation and protection of bonded labourers.